Okay, I've pressed all the buttons. I've dialed all the knobs. I've set all the sliders. Welcome to yet another episode of WIC TV. It's a cross-ideological space where we come together to talk about issues both political and cultural, from the silly to the serious. Gang, I didn't know if I was going to go live today. I was like, you know what? We've had a pretty good week of content, yesterday excluded. But mostly it's been some good panels. Maybe I'll take a break. Maybe I'll take a day off. But then I listened to the Supreme Court oral arguments put forth by TikTok and ByteDance and all the people involved, right? About the TikTok divestment bill, or that had been passed into law. It has been challenged in court, and Supreme Court is under kind of a tight deadline to make a ruling on this. So they heard the oral arguments today, and I listened to those, and I had some thoughts. So today we are going to be talking about the TikTok divestment bill, what it does, what it's meant to do, what are some of the arguments for and against, and where we stand on it. And I've invited all these lovely individuals who I'm going to let tell you who they are to talk about it with me. But thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for being here. Thank you, Kinetic Pause, for the sub for 6 months. Thank you. Really appreciate you. And yeah, thanks to Dylan Bowser, Zero Fox, Cowboy Subs, Wolf of Mandalore, Dylan Bowser. Yeah, all of you. Welcome to the stream. And we'll get started. First of all, I guess let's start with Audacity. Tell people who you are, what you do, and what you think.
Yeah, I'm Audacity. My career is in information security. I currently work on international standards of information security, ranging everywhere from the U.S. To operate in areas like NIST and whatnot, GDPR in the EU, and China's standards of information security requirements. I've been doing this for, I just hit 10 years actually. So. Yeah, been in this mix for a while, and this is an interesting case to me. I am not necessarily against TikTok being banned, but I do understand the concerns, the reasonings, and the hows and whats regarding the SCOTUS oral arguments today. I don't think either side really had strong arguments for their points. But I guess we'll get into that later.
Yeah, we'll get into the weeds as we go, right? And we'll talk about it. But thanks for being here. Really appreciate your interest in this, and glad to have you, Timothy Imholt. Who are you? What you do?
Hi, everybody.
What are your thoughts?
So if you've seen me on social media, you probably know I'm a physicist by training. My PhD's in physics. I spent forever at the university side. Went to work in the defense and aerospace sector, and now I work in the sort of venture space, mostly in predictive analytics as applied to the social media space, so we can help boost people's message as it goes out using third-party tools. So I own and operate a third-party tool that actually interacts with all the different social media platforms, including TikTok.
Okay, well, thank you for being here, and I guess we'll get what you think as we go, as we talk about it. Appreciate you.
What I think. Well, is the ban good or bad? We'll get to in a minute, because I think it has good points and bad points. But I'm less concerned about what data it shows, which was part of the arguments made at the Supreme Court, and more concerned about the data harvesting side of it, which is truly atrocious in the TikTok case. But it, I don't have anything for or against TikTok, but man, their data harvesting is atrocious.
Fair enough. We'll get into it. And last, but certainly not least, Katusha, tell people about yourself, what you do, what you think.
So I have a background in criminal justice, and I am currently on the long and arduous road of eventually hopefully becoming an attorney. So I like to talk about politics online because it is an interest of mine. So that's why I'm here. You can follow me on social media at Premier Katya. I don't stream, but I just hang around people who do. I just show up. I don't know. So I'm happy to talk about TikTok today. I don't I hear good arguments on either side. I understand kind of the free speech concern, but then I also understand how there is an issue with the data collection angle. So we'll kind of look forward to figuring out what's what with that.
And again, it's something that has, at least for me, right, I've vacillated back and forth on what I think about the TikTok ban. And to be clear, it is not strictly a ban. So to let everyone know, the law states that if ByteDance, the owner of TikTok LLC, does not divest, right, then it can't operate within the United States. So it's a divestment law. They're seeking to divest from force ByteDance to divest, to sell basically to a non-Chinese company. That's what the law is seeking to do and requiring it to do. ByteDance has said it's not going to sell, and if it, yeah, that they're just really strict on, we aren't selling. We're not going to sell this. So there is a tension here, right? So let's talk about some of the threats. Like, why, in your guys' opinion, why does Congress care about this? Why does Congress want a divestment from ByteDance? What do you guys think?
Obviously, I feel like the data collection angle is probably like, among the largest ones, if not the largest. The idea that this algorithm, this company that has so much of our information and so much data on like our preferences and the things we do, does have, like some reporting, or, they do report directly to the Chinese government. That's a concern that they have. I think that's one of the big ones.
What
Thoughts?
I think it goes one step further than that, because like all the social media platforms, whether it's X or Instagram or whoever, gathers data, but TikTok, if you look at their terms and conditions carefully, it actually says it can actually look outside your app for things that it wants to gather information on. So it can look at what other apps do you have on your phone, who are you emailing, can I have your contact list? It can really kind of dive deep into your mobile device or your computer, whereas the other platforms don't really dive as deeply. So it actually gathers data further and wider than the other ones do. And I think that was one of the arguments made before the Supreme Court, although I think it was one of the ones we didn't get to see because there was something that passed by quick in their oral arguments and said, well, it's the redacted section. We can't talk about that. So those kind of got glossed over. But if you look at their terms and conditions and kind of what those things do, when we develop apps around it, it's almost, we almost don't like to put the stuff that deals with TikTok in a way that it interacts with anything else, just because its T's and C's are so onerous.
Right.
Fair enough. Audacity, do you have any input on this?
Yeah, I've had to scope company policy around TikTok and like Huawei devices before, and it's just the general scope of everything that comes out of that region, the information that gets collected, and then everything that it generally violates in terms of regulation. I consider GDPR, the EU, to be the gold standard in this scope and scale. And ByteDance and TikTok, their terms and conditions, the wording of everything within their end user license agreement, it runs close just without even considering what they're actually doing. Just the wording in that document alone runs extremely close, if not already, towards violating GDPR statutes and everything. And there are already like a plethora of EU-based lawsuits and class actions against TikTok and ByteDance for violating a lot of personal data requirements and data encryption requirements, data sharing requirements, on top of things that closely relate to like COPPA laws here in the United States. So their collection's aggressive, and there's no guarantee that your data is protected. At the same time, there's no guarantee that they aren't finding some kind of like means or circumnavigation around getting your data back to Chi-Coms and everything for processing.
My issue with the whole, this is why I'm torn on this issue. I really am. Because there are legitimate concerns, as all of you have mentioned, about data collection, right? Data harvesting, how they use that data, how they violate different laws, regulations, and things. I think these are all valid concerns. However, and when we talk about, like, as was discussed in the bill and also in Congress in the debate of the bill, as well as the oral arguments today, there is a national security, there is a credible risk here to our national security with having a foreign-owned company owning the rights to this kind of thing. My problem comes in with the remedy that the bill puts forth. I don't know if it's an appropriate remedy. And what I mean by that is, like, we can recognize that something is a threat, right? Like, Katusha, you might be a threat, right? You have a credible risk that you're going to come and you're going to stab me, okay?
No.
It's possible. It could happen. There's a credible risk. I've seen you angry, okay?
All I have is this pen.
Yeah, exactly. You
Oh
know
my
what?
God!
But we've seen John Wick do nasty
Exactly.
things. No,
Exactly. So there's
Yeah, he does it with a pencil though.
but there's a threat, right? Now, there are reasonable remedies to that threat. I simply don't ever invite you over. I don't tell you where I live, right? There's all these different remedies. Another remedy to that threat, which would be, I think, inappropriate, is if I hired a hitman to come and take you out, right? That would be an inappropriate way to address the risk here. So when we talk about China, right, owning ByteDance, who owns TikTok LLC, right? I'm too many L's out, right? Limited liability corporation. You know what I'm talking about, right? I don't know if in seeking to remedy the threat and the risk there, that they should be violating the First Amendment rights of an American-owned company. And I think I worry.
Well,
if I may finish, and then you can respond. I worry that that's what this bill does. Go ahead.
Yeah, you go ahead, Tim.
So that actually is kind of the whole crux of this, right? They're trying to say, oh, well, because of the First Amendment, you can't really limit what we do. Number one, you have to make the argument that ByteDance, a Chinese company, is protected under the First Amendment, which it's not, because it's not a U.S. entity.
But the TikTok itself is an American entity and is
right.
an American origin.
But
it
in
absolutely
those same,
does have force.
But in those same arguments, right? But in those same oral arguments, I said it's really hard to argue that both those things can be separated, right? Because it's all kind of one big pile of code.
Yeah.
So, but let's play that argument out for a second and say, hey, look, is First Amendment really appropriate? Because the First Amendment, any of the amendments, the First Amendment gives me the right to free speech. It doesn't mean that I have to use your megaphone to have that free speech. I can use other megaphones as well to get that free speech heard. I'm not required under the First Amendment to have access to TikTok. I'm required to have the ability to say whatever I want to say. It doesn't say I have to be given a mechanism to do it.
But it also says that the government can't punish you for a viewpoint. So, for example, like TikTok acts as, if you will, an editor. That was the argument made. Like, it has editorial discretion on what it publishes, what it promotes, and what it does not. Like a magazine, like New York Times does, Washington Post, right? They aren't required to cover everything. They get to choose what's on their front page. They get to choose what they promote. They get to choose what they do not, right? And the argument put forth, and I think it was a compelling one, is that by forcing ByteDance to sell, right, they're putting an undue burden simply because of the content. I think that the data can be addressed. It's a real concern, and the data harvesting can be addressed in other ways. But again, this, as argued, they didn't even try to address it in those other ways. They didn't even try to make any kind of law saying, oh, well, you just can't sell or give that private information to a Chinese company like ByteDance, which they could have done. They refused to do so. I think this bill just doesn't. It needs to go back to the drawing board, right? That's my opinion.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
That harkens back to the scope. Sorry, Kat.
No, you go.
That harkens. It's an issue. I have an issue with the scope as well. It's not a good execution. You can do compensatory controls around this. You can identify exactly how TikTok is allowed to operate within the U.S. and interact with ByteDance, and everyone can be happy. I harken back to the initial ban wave of TikTok when it was being addressed in the Army and the Navy and the DoD overall, when they passed the no TikTok on. I think it's No TikTok on Government Devices Act. And it's simply because the scope and scale of the information being collected by TikTok, also what soldiers and sailors may post on TikTok, just opens up a huge swath of like OPSEC issues and everything like that. It's an extremely granular and targeted position to take, and it makes a lot of sense. Now, thinking that TikTok is operating such a broad net that they will be able to kneecap the country essentially with all the data they're collecting. There's a serious concern there, but just straight up banning it doesn't make sense. You would just control how it behaves more so than whether or not it gets to exist within this country.
Right, and the Supreme Court made this argument in regards to like the free speech side of things that I thought was a really good, or the lawyer in the Supreme Court, not the Supreme Court themselves. I'm sorry.
You're all good.
The attorney, Noel, whatever his name was, he made this argument going forward that, as an example, it was basically, what if China basically held Jeff Bezos hostage or held his kids hostage and said, hey, you need to post in the Washington Post this, and this that we tell you to put on the front cover. And then he does it. And then as a result, the government says, oh, well, Mr. Bezos, China's telling you to put that there. So you have to either sell the Washington Post or you have to shut it down. Which, when you look at it from that angle, like, okay, we might be restricting some of, either like the Washington Post speech, this, that, and the other, just because they're influenced by another person or another entity or a foreign government. But as we've looked at, like the argument also made, stuff like with FARA, like you can't restrict somebody's speech just because they have influence from a foreign entity. So if it's due to that, then I feel like, yeah, this is way overreaching and there could be something more granular that attacks directly the data angle of things instead of this overall, you can't be, like, you gotta sell completely just because it's a Chinese company or an adversary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's the argumentation was really silly in all of that. I don't get, well, for one thing, they were I hate that they're referring to TikTok's free speech rights. Like, okay, you're a company. I hate that companies share in that regard. Like your company, like you don't, the Bill of Rights, in my opinion, does not apply to companies. I'm
Really?
sorry.
I disagree with that fundamental. I think
It
that,
can
like,
apply to the individuals within it, but it's not necessarily like.
well, Washington, let's use a newspaper company as an example. It would be silly to say, well, the newspaper company is a company, so the First Amendment doesn't apply to that company because it's a company. That would be silly.
Yeah,
It's a newspaper. I mean, really, right?
I can get behind that, but that's very like scope specific. So, in regards to something like the newspaper where you're supposed to have freedom of the press and everything, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. But when it's just TikTok is not a newspaper company, it is a platform. It is a it is a platform as a service, software as a service, infrastructure. It is not.
Yeah, but it all boils down to one thing, right? So TikTok, the U.S. entity, is a wholly owned subsidiary of ByteDance, a Chinese company. So is it a U.S. company or is it a foreign-owned company? That's problem number one. Well, in reality, as a business owner, I can tell you that if I have a holding company that owns 5 others, I'm still the holding company. I'm really the owner, right? So that's just the way it works.
Yeah, it's a downstream organization.
Yeah, so I almost have a harder time with the argument that, well, it's a U.S. company, because it's really not. It might be legally formed in the U.S., but it ain't a U.S. company. So do First Amendment rights apply to people who aren't U.S. citizens? Even if you say U.S. companies get them, does Der Spiegel get First Amendment protections? Do they get Second Amendment protections? Can they carry, So it boils out to this question of, does our Constitution, do our constitutional rights extend to people globally just because I, as a U.S. citizen, may use that platform?
I
mean,
I don't. Oh, go ahead, please.
Well, I think it depends. And if we're talking about like sanctions that are getting placed on people who are using that platform or who are accessing this stuff, I mean, because it's technically it's harder in like the global world, global economy, global speech that we live in and live under. But like, I mean, technically, if we're accessing it here, and it's available to U.S. citizens, I mean, in certain ways, couldn't it be arguments be made that that is speech that is technically within the
So
U.S.?
there's an actual case on this from
Well, yeah,
1965.
but then it boils back down to I'm allowed to have free speech, but does it mean I have to use free speech? I'm only, I can use it through there, or can I use it through X or Instagram or a US company?
Well, it's here's the thing: the government cannot, and this is from the Lamont case. I'm not sure if you are familiar with it. It's from 1965. It was during the Cold War. Basically, and I'll just tell the story for my audience here in case they are unaware. Basically, the U.S. Postal Service put out a thing saying, if you want to get Russian propaganda, like from the communist manifestos and things like that, right, from Russia, you had to put in writing that you were willing to receive that mail. Okay, that was the law that was put in place. The SCOTUS struck that down because they said that it put too much of a burden on the U.S. citizen, and the United States, because of the First Amendment, could not restrict a private citizen, a U.S. citizen, from accessing that information. It, to my knowledge, hasn't been overturned, and I think that applies here, right? I think that by banning TikTok, if I may finish, by banning TikTok, what you are doing is you are restricting my access as an American citizen. If I want to consume that, even if it's Chinese propaganda, even if it is Russian propaganda, the First Amendment protects my right to consume that if I wish.
But would that really apply? Because in 1965, the U.S. Postal Service was still a U.S. government entity, and it was one of the few ways to actually disseminate information. And now you can't say that TikTok is the only way I could possibly get that information to you, whereas in 1965, one of the very few ways to get that information around was the U.S. Postal Service.
Yeah, I was going to touch on that too. U.S. Mail was really like a centralized service at that point in time. It was pretty much the only place you could go to freely, to actually share around information. There's alternatives to TikTok, like X, which is a great platform, works all the time. There's no problems with it.
I don't know if that really matters in this case, because we're talking about accessing information, and then there's other ways that they could get it. Like, the problem was that they should be able to access the information freely. If we say like, oh, they could access different information, or they could access other information in a different manner, then I feel like that argument could be expanded to cover a lot of things. Like, for example, like news outlets, right? If it's like you could just use a different social media platform, like what? Could we just say like no more Washington Post because you could go to New York Times? Then what are we up to? Like, that's, it's questioning.
I mean, yeah, that's exactly right, and I'll just echo it, right? Like, yes, it's possible we can get those news elsewhere, but the government can't dictate to me, right? At least it has. If it does, it has to face certain burdens of proof that, again, I don't think it has in this case, right? They call it strict scrutiny. And if you read the oral arguments, if you listen to the oral arguments, they bring this up several times, the idea of strict scrutiny, right? Does it meet that criteria? And again, I'm a layman. I'm not a lawyer, full disclosure. But from the arguments made, I found the ByteDance and TikTok's lawyers pretty persuasive that it did not. It did not meet that strict scrutiny. Because again, there are other remedies to the potential threats. And I want to make it clear to everyone here, right? I am not saying that TikTok isn't a threat. It is. But it's how we deal with that threat. That makes a difference. And I think that this bill I'm worried more about the violations to the First Amendment and the power that this will give the government, especially under Trump, right? Who is, at this moment, suing, what was her name? Ann Seltzer, I think, for putting out a poll he did not like. He's suing her, right?
Yeah, he's always been a litigious little prick.
Yeah,
yeah.
I don't know if I want to give this kind of power for Trump to just say national security 3 times, and suddenly he's able to just ban whatever company he wants. That's
he's actually asked the Supreme Court to kind of keep it around.
Yeah.
Right? So he's kind of been like,
He asked for a
behind.
postponement of it.
well,
Yeah,
sure,
'cause
but
apparently
Trump
he
is
can-
look. Trump's not doing it out of the goodness of his heart.
I
Like,
mean,
let's be real.
there's operatives on both sides of the aisle that want this banned because some people blame it for things like getting Trump elected, and other people blame it for like the spread of communism in America and anti-Jewish hate and stuff like that. Like, there's a lot of people that want it banned. Doesn't necessarily mean that it should be banned, but in terms of addressing it as a threat to the nation, I don't care about either of the arguments that the lawyers on either side of this made, because they weren't as strong. Because at the end of the day, Wick and Tim and everybody's pretty much touched on it at this point. There's compensatory controls you can put around this to make it less of a threat to not a threat at all. So why even? I mean, going full bore of both barrels on this issue, just banging it across the board, is ridiculous, especially since people within the United States are going to find a way to get around the ban to access it anyway.
Well, I mean, yeah, you just VPN stocks would rise tomorrow if the ban is upheld, right? They'd all go
Yeah,
through.
and then the NSA would have a field day because they love that centralized data.
Yeah,
accumulation.
but I think the one thing I'd love to hear everybody's opinion on is that, if they kind of glossed over it in the hearing, in like, we don't know where they make their money or how the money flow is, and it hit me that when they said that, and they kind of glossed over it quickly, was something about cash flow and is it profitable or not. Most of the platforms, whether it's X or Meta or whoever, make an enormous amount of money selling data. Right? They just do. And it's aggregated, and it's not like, it's specific to Tim Imholt, although some of it is, but a large part of it's not. It's just, hey, Tim's 52, he's white, he's male, he's got a PhD. So, it kind of lumps me into a certain demographic. And they sold a lot of it for marketing purposes. Well, and, it's owned by the Chinese government. I think the argument that we didn't get to hear in the redacted stuff, and certainly some of the data harvesting, is aimed at that value of the data. So forget the sharing stuff and manipulating US elections for a minute. The value of that data harvesting, and what are they using that data harvesting for on the other side? Because all the platforms here, with the exception of X, are typically publicly traded. I think Blue Sky's not, but most of them are publicly traded. So there's an enormous amount of regulatory and people poking through their books and seeing what they're doing kind of controls. We don't know what China's using that information for and using that data for. It could be anything from how to get Temu ads across to me more efficiently to, hey, here's the soft spots in the US when you try to invade, right? That's just...
Hold on, walk me through that, because I'm having a hard time, and this might be a lack of imagination on my part, of seeing how that TikTok data would expose weak spots of invasion, right? What's a worst case scenario
easy.
of the data, right?
I'll let you take it.
Yeah. So weak spots of invasion, it doesn't even have to necessarily pertain to invasion. It could just be pertaining to exploitation. I was actually having fun with my wife, talking about this whole conversation. And it is generally that if enough people, even though it's banned on government devices, people within the government could still have it on their personal devices, right? You're a so and so age married man, and you are constantly going on TikTok to look up thirst traps and like thirst traps and share thirst traps and like do all this very, perform all this behavior that might make your significant other pretty upset. That's leverage on you if ByteDance chooses to do so with that information, leverage against you, kind of hold you a little bit of hostage. Like, hey, do you want to deal with this headache, or do you want to go fill in this USB drive with some data right now? But also at the same time, if service member, in terms of to take it to terms of invasion, due to the usage information that's being collected by TikTok, things like geolocation and everything like that. They could actually you could actually data map that in a way that shows defense activities along our borders or out at sea or whatever as well. So that information,
I think that
it's all loose lips and ships, right?
Yeah,
there.
but I think that as far as I'm aware, I wasn't in the military during the whole TikTok stuff, right? But as far as I'm aware, service members and stuff are banned from using it. on their phones and things like that, right? So because they recognize that there is a risk there, so they simply ban
Only on their
use of these
government
things.
devices.
Well-
Only if you're issued a government device under the mobile device management service that's put out to government
At least
devices.
when
is
I
it
was
banned.
in the military and I had my clearance, I couldn't use it on my personal. I couldn't use stuff like that. It was different things at the point. But there was places I could not go even on my personal device. They said,
Well, you
"Do
had
not, or you will
TS,
lose
right?
your Or
Yeah.
if you do this, you will lose your clearance, right? Because it is a risk. And so even on my personal devices, I could not use certain things and do certain things because
Yeah.
I would lose my clearance. And I
Yeah,
think
well, you're
perhaps something like that is
You're scoped for
preferable.
TS. You're
Yeah.
gonna go under review every once in a while.
Yeah, yeah.
But people that hold a general secret or just general clearance aren't going to go under scope. They're still going to have that software on their application. That application's still going to be broadcasting whenever and wherever it can. And that information is not, it's not good to have. I mean, imagine you're some Navy E1 or whatever an E1 is in the Navy. I don't know, like a minnow or whatever their ranks are, and you have TikTok on your phone and you're on a nuclear submarine. And hey, we're gonna do some surfacing on the nuclear submarine so you guys can get on the sat net to make phone calls back to your loved ones or whatever. That app is still running in the background, collecting and sending information. You just gave away a nuclear submarine's position.
I mean, fair.
And another thing as well, I mean, we talk about people who are directly in the government as well as like military people. There's also private contractors who work with defense that,
Solid
this
point.
shit could be like wide open.
Solid
I used to
point,
work.
Kat.
I used to work for Raytheon. I was involved in the upgrade on the Patriot missile program. So yeah, there's a ton of people that they would be interested in. And it's not just that. I mean, so take it another step further and say, hey, look, it's not just government programs. One of the bigger things that I see coming down the pipeline that really should be concerned with anybody that's in these sort of happen to worry about encryption space is who's going to win in the quantum computing world. All right. So if we get the first viable quantum computer or China gets it, cybersecurity just became Swiss cheese for whoever has that. Right.
AES, every standard of AES just became trash.
Yeah, nuked it, right? So if you can actually kind of gather who's actually working on it, now that guy over at Google who's actually working on making qubits more efficient, is cheating on his wife. Well, great, send me all that information, otherwise I'll start telling people, right? So it has these little bitty problems in that it's not just government stuff, but it's industrial stuff too.
Yeah. Infrastructure stuff, people in infrastructure that are, I don't know if TikTok has like a dono service built into it, like Twitch or whatever, but I don't know, same thing, harkening back to the thirst trap stuff, man. Like, oh, you've been sending a lot of money to Snow Bunny 1998. We're gonna tell your wife unless you flip this grid right here.
Right. Yeah. There's also a lot of information on the things that Americans buy and a lot of stuff that's shipped around as well, like via TikTok shop. And like the issue isn't like these data points on their own being a concern. The issue, like when people talk about the national security risk, is more what all these things, if put together, what picture that they could show about individuals who may have information. Which is why I think that the problem is here with a lot of this, with this legislation about where it's like you divest or you're done deal. I think that honestly, prior to this, if an avenue could have been done that would just regulate how much data of people's apps are allowed to collect, that would be a lot better for everybody. Because a lot of the times their data is sold elsewhere by American companies.
I mean, yeah, like
exactly.
that's another point. Like,
I want to touch on that if I can.
If in a moment, because I want to piggyback on it as well. Like, this is why it's weird to me you would try to single out TikTok for this when Elon Musk could just sell it to China. All your Twitter shit. There's no law preventing him. He could do it.
There's a lot of laws preventing him.
I mean, sure, but if you make a law saying that no company can sell it, right, and TikTok LLC couldn't transfer it to ByteDance
but Twitter, unless it stays it as metadata or you entered it into the app, it's not gathering data from other apps on your phone.
Exactly. By design,
TikTok
it's not allowed to have it.
Right. Then another avenue could be legislature saying, hey, this is the type of data you are allowed to collect. That's the type of data that you're not allowed to collect. If you're collecting the no data, then you can't operate in the U.S. anymore.
Exactly. And that's why GDPR is the gold standard on this, because
Right.
they've actually gone out and identified, hey, this is the data you're allowed to collect, and this is what you're allowed to do with the data you collect, and this is the encryption and transferred standards around that data. And I'm pretty sure there's a solid hold and ban on ever selling it for advertisement purposes or anything. It's like, if somebody has to put their name, their first name, last name, email address, and phone number in an application to register, goes into a database, it stays in that database, and it doesn't go anywhere. And if it does need to go anywhere, what happens is that company is scrutinized in routine audits constantly to make sure that they are upholding those standards. And it's a really big, like, it's a really big dream of mine that the U.S. gets on the same kind of standards at some point in time.
What's preventing that? Out of curiosity, just to, I mean, I know this is a little bit of an aside, but
We're slow to
what's
develop
stopping
it, and we don't have a central cybersecurity like domain like GDPR in the EU. Like, we don't have like a committee in the House that operates with the same aggression that EU does.
Yeah, I mean, we tend to be very reactionary at a federal level instead of getting in front of a problem. Because
Yeah,
like
which
TikTok's been banned in India for what, a year and a half or something now. I mean, it was gone a
yeah.
while ago. And the GDPR over in the EU, I think they saw it coming and they kind of agreed to do a lot of things. Whereas here we look at, okay, well, let's have which lobby group is more powerful, blah, blah, blah. We go down a long list of stuff that other people don't do,
Yeah,
which is a
in
whole
the
different
note,
live stream on why I think, federal elections should be publicly funded. And I'm as right wing as they come. So
it's a whole nother topic almost, right? Like, and we can absolutely have that discussion at
hey,
some
can we
point,
start a
right?
conversation about magnetic doors? Anyway, no,
Oh,
but
God.
no.
but
Oh yeah, are y'all free until 5 in the morning?
Yeah.
but that I drafted up, like, I wanted to make sure that Wick knew I wasn't full of shit, so I sent him a note, and the way I frameworked in the note, like the difference between GDPR and the U.S. standards, is that the GDPR is active while the U.S. is like passive. If a lawsuit or something pops up, like, oh my God, Facebook sold my data and sold it to Arabian, data miners that are now using my computer as a Bitcoin miner or something like that, like, you start that suit here in the U.S., the FBI gets involved, but then the only thing the federal government does is see if there's any details within that suit that violate standing federal U.S. law to try and figure out if they need to get involved or not. They're not active in defending the constituency or consumers within the American borders on data protection and data rights. So it's the U.S. government is simply just not aggressive enough on these details. And in a perfect world, they would just turn to the EU and be like, we want to adopt all of your standards. How do we do it?
Right.
Go
And
ahead,
I
Cuddy,
think
you're saying
that
I have a thought.
when we're talking here too, one of the problems with the current legislation on TikTok is that, and why that type of solution would be way better. Like, you have to always think about, hey, like, what they're going to lose by not going along with it and just saying no more TikTok in the United States versus what they'll have to do to comply. So if there's too much of a gulf, like if we're talking, okay, you can operate in the US, but you can't collect these sorts of data. You have to use this type of encryption. You have to use EU standards. Okay, they're willing to do that. Okay, you can operate in the United States, but you have to sell the entire company to a non-Chinese entity when, like they've had it since the beginning and we're talking multi-billion-dollar company, blah, blah, blah. Okay, now we're talking like, okay, we know the US is a big market, but who the hell is you? And they're less likely to go along with it.
Well, I think it was also very telling that the one thing that I think was sort of glossed over in the Supreme Court hearing was the thing of value to TikTok is not the user interface; it's the uploads that they've had, which is great. But that's not that's not theirs, right? That's the users like Wick or me or somebody who's developed content. But the only thing of real value they've got, and it's a huge value, is the algorithm that determines what order you see that stuff in, right? So even if they did divest it, there was an argument for a while. It's like, well, okay, we'll buy it, but you keep the algorithm and we'll just keep TikTok. Well, then it's not TikTok anymore, right? Because the algorithm is going to be completely different. The order you see stuff in is going to be different.
Right.
So I looked at it like, even if they sold it, unless they literally just opened the kimono, so to speak, and said, here's all of our source code, have fun. You're now the US version and we're going to keep the rest of the world. You've basically just kind of given away the secret sauce, right? And the lawyer kind of touched on it. Like it's the lawyer for ByteDance, I think it was, kind of touched on it. Like, you can't, to do that would cost so much money and take so long, it wouldn't almost be worth doing. Right, to kind of separate those two things out, it would take years to pull apart. And having led software teams, I could tell you that would take years to pull those two things apart.
Yeah, I mean, I can kind of see where you're coming with that, but it's not. I mean, if the only objective you have to fulfill is to just divest, then just divest. I mean, but the whole point is if they actually divest into a primarily operated U.S. Incorporated or LLC, they fall under the same guise of control that Meta and X do, and we have a better control there. I mean, my sole belief is that we want a divestment into the U.S. because we want to cut in. We want to be able to cut in on that information as well. But also at the same time, it's if they don't divest and they go, okay, screw it, then TikTok just recedes back into the woods and reemerges as another application at some point in time, and then we're having this whole conversation over again.
Well, that's kind of what I thought was a possible outcome of all this, is that TikTok leaves the US, right? We're 300 million citizens. There's 100 million TikTok users, give or take 120 million, whatever the number is. They've already pulled out of India. That's 1 point something billion people. So they probably have more users in India than we have citizens in the United States. How long before TikTok just decides to, okay, ByteDance shuts TikTok down and comes up with a new version called Tic-Tac-Toe or something? I don't know. Pick your favorite new name, and it's just TikTok under a new moniker. How long before that occurs? Because the thing that's attracting U.S. kids or U.S. people into posting on TikTok is their payout rate for content developers is a lot better than some of the other platforms. There's people making a lot more money over there than they are on Instagram or YouTube or Twitter, except for Wick. He's making all the money he can over on Discord. But the payouts on TikTok are a lot higher than some of the others. So that's how they got those content providers in the first place. And that also led me to start to wonder, what are the real economics for them like? Because we've seen the profit margins on Meta and others that are publicly traded here in the U.S. How are they paying that much more and actually turning profit? Or are they turning profit because they are partially owned by the Chinese government? They don't care because that data is more valuable to them than it is to a publicly owned entity here.
Well, one of the kickoff points for TikTok in the early days, when it went from Musical.ly to TikTok and they were trying to attract people into TikTok, was that there was a lot of speculation over. It was never investigated because the federal government didn't care at the time. Nobody really cared at the time. Oh, the kids are on another social media app. Those damned kids. But they were artificially inflating the numbers of, specific creators to try and attract people to get in and start using TikTok. So it's an artificial environment from the get-go. And just based off that information alone, if we ban it, it's just going to pop up as something else, and that's why we need to focus on the standards involved with these kinds of applications and whatnot, and not just specifically on the single company. Like we need to build up an actual infrastructure around these types of scenarios and not just try to continue, not try to just put out these fires as they pop up. And that's not a dig at LA.
Sure.
Well,
okay,
I think you're right, because if you look at the amount of, like, somebody asked me a couple of months ago, because I work with some investors, because you work in the startup space, you work with them. They said, okay, what data points do you have access to by API? And I'm like, dude, it would just be easier for you to tell me what data you're looking for. Because it's out there somewhere by an API.
Yeah.
Right?
I published a lot, brother.
Like,
Let's go.
You just tell me what you want, I'll go find it. And it came down to somebody's like, well, can you tell me by city block, who's more likely to buy certain cars? And I'm like, actually, you can, because you can buy the Experian data that gives you down to sort of credit card buying habits by literally city block. To the point where I could probably tell you exactly what Wick's going to have for breakfast just based on what goes on inside his particular area.
Yeah, just by the credit score of his zip code.
You'd be
Jesus.
surprised.
No, it's worse than that. They actually will give you buying habits for certain products too.
Yeah, which on TikTok, there's a lot of that information because a lot of people use TikTok Shop. More than I would guess use that shit.
There's a shop?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh my god. I don't use the app, man.
I don't have TikTok on my phone or on my devices because I, don't like TikTok
because of the data
reasons.
problem. No.
Yeah, right.
TikTok Shop is basically it's just people like selling their their items and like pimping their
pink
shit,
sauce.
as well as they're doing as well as doing like affiliate marketing shit. You can buy stuff directly through the app now, which
one of the
my 12-year-old daughter makes candles at home and she wanted to sell them over TikTok.
If they've got a marketplace set up, they're here to stay, baby. They'll just rebrand and come back in.
So one of the things that was brought up during the oral arguments, and one of the things that have been suggested elsewhere, is that the reasoning that the government is giving for making this law is false. That they say that they're not trying to censor content, but they actively are trying to censor content. And if it's true that they are actively trying to censor content, then I think by definition it runs afoul of the First Amendment, right? So I guess if you listen to it, right, or if you've read into the bill and things like that, how likely do we think it is that the government's being upfront about its stated reasons? That it's just concerned about the national security, data collection, blah, 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 blah stuff. What are we thoughts here? Go ahead.
I think we got to let Kakachi go first on this one because we.
Yeah.
I don't think that they are being upfront with every single one of their reasons. I think that the national security stuff and the data collection stuff, could be a large reason, but I do think that, they might have secondary, tertiary reasons in regards to certain content that does get popular there. In regards to how the algorithm could be used to promote certain ideas in the US, which we've seen with stuff like Cambridge Analytica. So, I do think that there could be additional motives, right?
Yeah, and that's, I'm fully willing to hitch my horse on there not being 100% upfront with it. But it's a general panic, it's the Red Scare again, but with technology. This is the problem you have with a bunch of, technologically illiterate boomers running the government, man. I'm sorry, Tim, but
I'm Gen X.
That's right. You're 58. I'm sorry.
It's 52. 52.
Well, the salt and pepper looks good on you, but it's just
because I have 3 kids. But now we still haven't had a Gen X president. Even Obama was still under the baby boomer category, so we still not even had a Gen X president. So
I was losing my mind, my shit even, when they brought the ByteDance CEO in, and you just have this like decrepit congressman. Is TikTok looking at my eyeballs to see if I'm excited? And I'm like, yo, dude, stop. Like,
Remember when they kept asking the guy from Singapore if he was part of the Chinese Communist Party?
Exactly,
like
over and over again. And it's and the Democrat side of the aisle is just so checked out because, at least AOC was still in high school when the first iPhone came out or something. It's but it's like it's some of the most embarrassing shit, and it really makes me want to like run for office because we need to get a handle on the ignorance, and they're not upfront with the whole reason for it. They're just scared of it. And it's like I said earlier, you just got sides on sides here going, well, Trump won because of this happened, or everybody found out about Biden's mental decline because of TikTok, so of course we got to ban it. And it's just
so. I don't mean to catch up. I'll be quiet for a second.
No, you're good. I'm pontificating, so just go.
He rambles. Just
So-
interrupt him. Go ahead.
So my thought is there's definitely politics at play here, because I think they wanted to be perceived as doing something because of the data harvesting side of it. And I think they wrote a shitty law that was based around sort of the easy way to kind of write one and maybe or maybe not have it enacted. And I think you need no further to look no further than, is this politics at its finest or not, than to look at the effective date of this, right? Because they wrote this thing past, what, 8 months ago, 10 months ago, a year ago, whenever it was. And it was supposed to go into effect the day before we changed presidents. I mean, come on. Really? You tell me they just
Yeah.
arbitrarily chose January 19th as the date this thing takes effect? That was just
Well,
accidental somehow.
that's
You're
one of
like,
the reasons
yeah,
that there's
that
this
day.
this is kind of a rush job on the Supreme Court
Right.
part, because there is kind of like a soft deadline here for this, where
Yeah.
if the
Like-
Supreme Court were to come out in favor of ByteDance and TikTok, if they come out in favor like 2 months from now, this kind of doesn't matter as
Right.
much, right? Like, yeah.
Another concern.
Please go ahead.
Sorry. Another concern I have, right, is what I see when I look into how these things are written, how this law is written, kind of really pointedly, really crappily, in a way that doesn't really address the baseline issue. I really, really feel that this is a situation where they're trying to come up with a way to legislatively like snipe TikTok specifically without affecting the American corporations that are now having bigger seats at the table within our government.
Well, also to augment what you're saying, I think, or add to that, I think also if you look at it, they almost couldn't write in data harvesting laws because so many other platforms do it as well. Even if you tried to say, hey, look, you're going to restrict it this way, you've now got compliance costs to go along with that, right? So if you come in and say, here's good data, here's bad data, prove to me you're only gathering good data, there's a lot of cost involved with that. So it makes it more expensive. So I think they targeted TikTok for the data harvesting side, but they didn't want to, cut the profit margins on everybody else doing data harvesting, or, cause everybody to have a huge compliant cost to go along with it. So I think you're right. I think they went after TikTok specifically, but I think they went after them for the wrong stuff. I think they should have gone after them for the data harvesting side and just said, okay, TikTok, because of this, thou shalt disappear forever from the United States.
Well, this
Yeah,
is a hard thing, because even if they had just come after that and tried to get them to divest just for that, and they had nothing else, and it still would place in effect, it would affect the First Amendment rights of the American citizens, right, who not only use TikTok but own TikTok in America, or at least they own the American version of the company. It would place a burden on them that I do think violates their First Amendment rights. So I guess like the kind of meta question here, and I know we've probably gone over it before, but I just want to remind people, it's are you willing to give up freedom for security, and how much of that are you willing to give up? And I think that my concerns with the data harvesting are real, but I'm also concerned of the precedents this set. And I'm concerned with how these politicians who haven't, I feel, been honest with us about why they're putting this in are going to use this. Like, is this just a stepping stone? I'm not sure it is. Do you guys want to talk a little bit about some of the other moderation changes that have been kind of coming up? Are you guys familiar with that at all? Like from
the Facebook stuff?
Yeah, the Facebook, the Meta. What do you guys think of that? I'm really curious.
I think that it's concerning. I think that, right, like freedom of speech is important, but the way that some of these rules seem to be written in a way that's pointed is like really concerning. Like when we're talking about where they don't let you, call people like mentally ill as an insult unless it's like because they're like LGBT. That's like, hello, what are you trying to say here? It's not just about freedom of speech, because they still do have quite like they do have some guidelines on what they allow and don't allow speech wise, but it does seem to be kind of pointed.
Other thoughts?
Reactionary. Zuckerberg's trying to get
Trump points.
No. All right. Look, as easy it is to make that claim, it's not that he's trying to make Trump points. He's trying to get Facebook and Meta back on track with its significance to the social media pool. And yes, and Meta, Facebook, and everything was super aggressive in the way it administrated certain topics, certain like groups and everything. They brought the ban hammer down. I would wager harder than Twitter when Twitter was still under Jack Dorsey back in the day. And Zuckerberg is seeing the relevant success Musk is having with X, even though, it's losing money and shit like that. But think of the infrastructure Zuckerberg has built up versus the infrastructure over X and realize that Zuckerberg is in a much more volatile position than Musk if Facebook doesn't pan out and everything. Like, he needs to reinstill faith and focus back into Facebook and Instagram in order for it to stay a viable company.
Do we think that they I mean, obviously these companies have influence in our politics, right? Do we think that they have a vested interest perhaps in seeing TikTok banned, right? Because I keep wondering how these things are connected, right? Like what factions are in play, so to speak, when it comes to these types of things. And I do wonder if Elon Musk and Zuckerberg and Bezos have a vested interest in just getting rid of a competitor in a real way.
Well, if you look at some of the shifts that the platforms are making, so like if you buy the blue check mark over on Twitter, you can now post longer videos than the 30 seconds I think it was before that. Instagram sometime this year is going to sunset posting videos as part of a regular post and only allow you to do it through Reels. But it's I think it's going out to 6 minutes or something that it's going to let you do. So I think the short answer is yes, it would certainly help them because people are going to go somewhere. They're not going to disappear from social media. That's not going to happen. But I do think it would increase numbers. Now, Zuckerberg in particular, I think there's been a lot of people, especially on X, that kind of blew it out of proportion. Like, oh, you can go on Instagram now and basically just, say the following, and they come up with some ludicrous statement. But what Zuckerberg's doing is he's going to a community notes section, kind of like X is, right? So it's like you can say whatever you want, but then they can, you can request a community note and somebody can tag underneath or go, no, that's really not true. This is true, right? And it kind of puts the truth in. So it leaves you see the idiotic one. And I've kind of liked that from a personal perspective on Twitter, because I got like 12,000 something followers on Twitter now. And I see a lot of stuff will go by my feed, and I'm like, what is this person saying? This is insane. And if you unfollow somebody and you're like, great, now that solves that problem. But you see some of these posts that are fake that are really compelling, and you look at it, you're like, okay, that looks pretty good. Is this real? Is it not? But if somebody's continually community noted as just being full of crap, it tells me, okay, I'm just going to unfollow that one, get rid of it, move on, right? So I kind of like that community note thing rather than just an outright ban, because what Facebook and Meta were doing before was if it said something you didn't like, nobody was going to see that post. It was gone. Right. So it allows it to be seen, but then also allows the platform to tell you that, yeah, that's a pile of crap. Right. So I kind of like that model in a way, rather than just suppressing it, because it goes back to your free speech argument. I could come out and say, hey, look, the Avengers movie was filmed on 35 millimeter film, and that's terrible. It makes it look bad. Right. Because somebody can come out and go, oh, my God, they did that. Really? And I want to watch it. And somebody community note that and fix my statement because obviously it wasn't. So I think that sort of community note thing is far more helpful than just an outright ban on somebody making a dumbass statement. Because what if the filters accidentally pick up a real statement as false and it kind of throws it away?
And I don't want to get like too into the weeds here. I do have some people coming on Monday to talk about this one specifically, but I'll just say this and we can discuss it a little bit. I think fact checking as an institution has kind of failed. I'm gonna be real with you. I think it's kind
of centralized fact checking is not the way to go. The one thing Community Notes has done on X, on Twitter, is which I'm not giving Elon Musk credit for Community Notes. He did not start that project. I'm pretty sure it was in the works before he took it over. But community moderation has been terrific because, a bunch of people just pile in on a post like, yo, this needs a note. A note gets created on it and the record gets set straight. And I like it because you could, there's a lot of bullshit on Twitter, and when you see that note on the bottom of an obviously bullshit post on X, you just breathe a little sigh of relief. You're like, woo! All right, it's not, the insanity is not too set in stone.
It's like, okay, I'm not the only one that knew that, right? So
Yeah, like
Yeah.
because beforehand it used to be like, oh, bullshit statement. Yup, it lives in fact and truth now.
Because let me tell you, as a physicist who spent a decade of my career at MIT, I've had people try to convince me of shit that's true that is just not freaking true under any version of physics that we understand. And it's always it's I get it in real life. I actually had somebody in real life once at a cocktail party try to convince me that Star Trek transporters are real, being kept secret by the U.S. government, and as a physicist, I should know. And I'm like,
What?
okay, buddy. Like, I'm going to need 2 old fashions for this conversation because this is going to be fun.
Only 2?
I already had one before that, so it was.
Oh,
So
good.
anyway.
3.
But and on social media it gets even worse. Like, oh, anti-gravity drives are a thing, and I'm like, it's not.
Yeah.
You get into some of these things, and it's like it's kind of nice to see that community note section take some of that burden away from people just having to like leave a comment, because the moment I step into that conversation, people who know my background are like, oh, he's in there, let's pile on him, and it's like you get these complete people who actually believe the gravity drives are real, trying to convince me that I need to go back and request a refund on my degree.
It's not even the gravity drives. It's like it was like a couple
Flat
months before the
earthers.
hurricanes that wrecked everybody's shit not too long ago. They were doing LiDAR surveys. It's directed energy weapons. It's like, no, dude, like it's a Cessna with a LiDAR on it. Calm down.
And then the hurricane machines.
I have a friend who's a state representative, and I won't say in which state, because he follows me on social and people can figure it out. He gets emails on a weekly basis that he forwards to me about chemtrails. Thank you for rolling the eyes. About people who firmly believe the chemtrails are being put in place to some kind of version of population control. And I got legitimate phone calls where people wanted to get me on a project, because I worked in nanotechnology for a long time, where people wanted to get me on a project as the COVID vaccines were coming out to prove that they were building nanostructures in our bloodstream to try to kill us. And I'm like, but it was only going to kill old people. I'm like, the disease is doing that now. Why would you need a vaccine to solve that problem? Right. So these people are out there and they're real, and it's nice to get those community note things to kind of solve that problem. And I think that's an interesting way to do it. And like you said, like Audacity said, that sort of community policing of those things has worked well. It works well for Reddit. And Reddit's got some crazy people on it.
Go ahead, Katiusha. Then I want to tie this back into the TikTok thing, right?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I totally get a lot of that, because like I work with a lot of older people who are the type that use Facebook all the time, and there are a good couple of them that believe in every conspiracy theory that anybody has ever come out with, some of which contradict each other, and it's very interesting. I believe the craziest one I've seen from one of the people that I work with was when that the ship went into that bridge.
I remember. Yeah. The Brooklyn
they were like,
Bridge, or the
oh,
Baltimore
this
Bridge
was
or something. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, well, that ship knocked down a whole bridge. This was Biden's doing. I'm like, what? And it's really funny because I'm not going to completely dox myself, but in the area in which the general vicinity in which I live, we had a ship hit a bridge back like a few decades ago. And the same thing happened. Like, was that an inside job too when that happened? Like, did the president do that? Like, was that Reagan? Like, I don't know.
It's all a conspiracy.
Yeah, I saw.
Yeah, once you believe one, you kind of start to believe them all. But go ahead, please.
My personal favorite is the moon landing people who said we never landed on the moon. I'm like, we're just gonna leave that one alone.
Buzz Aldrin took care of that.
Well, this does tie in, actually. The conspiracies talk does tie into the discussion at large, because one of the things that people are worried about is TikTok spreading these conspiracy theories, these amplifying voices that are just spewing bullshit. And that is a concern, I think. As far as I know, and again, I don't have TikTok, so you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but they don't have any kind of community notes system or anything like that, do they? Am I wrong?
No.
Am I right?
No.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
they have reporting, and I think one of the reporting options is for like misinformation or whatever, but it's not fully carried out. And this was this was a conversation I was having about it earlier. Is that TikTok is simply just allowing the mass generation of content and allowing not only for misinformation posts to be generated, but also allowing for stuff like degenerative behavior to be propagated as well, like various like challenges and stuff, shit that could be harmful to kids. You know,
The devious licks bullshit when people are
yeah,
just
right, like
stealing. That was the
like
trend.
really terrible stuff that could either cause direct harm to kids or get them in a lot of trouble and essentially fuck up their entire lives. So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
not great. Moderation's
Recently
not
there was
great
a
on
case.
TikTok.
Recently there was a case of like it was just like, somebody just got sentenced for that, but there was somebody who was like 18 or 19 at the time. This is 2022, I believe, and they were on TikTok live speeding and having people like basically place bets on how fast this dude was going. And then at some point he did hit another car going like 150 miles an hour, 130, some random shit. It was like 100.
Yeah.
It
Is
was
he
crazy.
here anymore in
And killed
existence?
6 people. He is
Oh,
alive. He killed 6 people.
damn.
Yeah.
Well,
Of course, the wicked
this
live.
is
Like shit
the
like that I
reason,
think should
yeah.
be taken down, because like you're really like perpetuating shit that acutely gets people killed.
Well, this is
Like
this is the
dangerous
tension
behavior is
here,
different.
right? This
Yeah.
is the tension here, and this is why I bring it up, because I think it's like a lot of look. I am as close to a free speech absolutist as you can get, right? Without actually being strictly a free speech absolutist, to be clear. But there too many people who are on my side of the fence, right? They'll hand wave away these concerns and hand wave away these problems, say, oh, well, it's not a big deal, or it's overblown, or it's not a real. No, I think that we have to recognize that free speech, and it comes with risks. It comes with downsides. There are downsides to free speech. There are harms that come to a society from free speech, from allowing people to spew bullshit, from allowing people to consume Russian propaganda or Chinese propaganda or just lies about the economy or lies about all sorts of things, right? There are downsides to this. There are downsides to society. There's downsides to us personally. It's a problem. But my concern is, and this is what I'm concerned with the TikTok divestment bill as well, to kind of get us back there, is that the First Amendment is a shield that protects honest actors and bad actors alike. When we weaken it so we can go after the bad actors, it weakens it for the good actors as well. And that is my concern with bans on TikTok and things like that, and bans on content within various platforms is, for example, a lot of people I've talked to, and I'll finish up quick, I know I'm long-winded here. A lot of people I've talked to is like, we should be able to punish liars, right? We should be able to ban liars and things like that. If you lie online, you should face a fine, right? Or maybe even go to jail. But the problem with that is like trying to decide who gets to decide who is lying, who's simply wrong, and what are the punishes, who decides the punishments for each. And I simply do not trust the state to make these distinctions, right? Because I see how they've done it before when they have had power, and it's not good. It's worse than allowing free speech. It's worse than allowing people to lie. That's my thoughts. What are your thoughts on this? We'll start with Katiusha and we'll go around the room. Go ahead.
Yeah, my final thoughts about this. Obviously, free speech, is important. And I tend to agree. Like, when we talk about, like, in other countries, like, this has happened in, like, England and stuff like that, where people are getting arrested or, like, in trouble for some social media posts, even though a lot of them are egregious. I think that does open a can of worms. So I actually don't think, like, on platforms, the biggest problem is what people are permitted to post. In the era of algorithms, it's more about what content gets pushed to people because that's what's most likely to reach them and most likely to influence their manner of thinking and the things that they believe, as opposed to just having somebody say something.
This is another thing, and I don't know if I agree with you here, because I hear this all the time. Like, misinformation influences how we think, and fair enough to an extent. But I think that a lot of misinformation and disinformation is created because people want that information. They go seeking it out, and it creates a market for it, right? And so they're like, you know what? I think that the government is poisoning us through chemtrails in the sky. And they Google, like, why is the government poisoning us with chemtrails in the sky and things like that? And they actively seek out that information. And people see this, and they're like, a lot of people are asking this question. Let's make something up, get a lot of clicks and views, and make a lot of money. And I think that we put the cart before the horse when it comes to this a lot of the times. It's not a one for one, right? But does that make sense?
People seek the information that they want to see, but there are situations in which these algorithms are kind of direct pipelines to one way or the other. Like if you create a new account, like on certain sites, and you just start scrolling, eventually, like on Reels or on TikTok on a new account, a lot of times people just eventually start getting political content to one side of the aisle, or they'll start getting conspiracy content, or they'll start getting this, like, a lot of these things are kind of they get happened upon, which starts people down where they do want to learn more about that, and they continue to see it, and because they look for it usually on the app that they're looking at. A lot of the times people aren't Googling too many things when they should be from reputable sources. And then that adds to their algorithm more. And then they see that comforting information, and then we're locked in. In addition, there are situations where different content is, I'd say, pushed in a biased manner. Like this did happen. This is happening, I'd say, on X to some degree, and did especially happen around the election.
To some degree.
To some degree.
It's big, baby. It is real big.
I'm being nice here, but like with the banners and stuff, especially, that was outrageous. Like the freaking massive Trump banners and stuff that were put up by the platform. Like, hello, you're clearly trying to push people who are not as informed down a certain path, because a lot of people are apolitical. A lot of people haven't expressed these ideas before social media. So yeah.
And what are the rest of your thoughts on this whole situation? Go ahead.
Not me.
I'm
joking. I already talked it out.
You just gave your thoughts. Unless you have more,
so
go ahead, please.
My thought on the algorithms is, the algorithm is going to show me something different than it's going to show Wick. The algorithm shows you what the whole point to the algorithm on any platform is, to make sure you stay on that platform for longer than you would have otherwise. So if it knows that you like, fake moon landing videos that say the moon landing was fake, it's going to show you every video that say the moon landing was fake, and you're going to wind up as Alex Jones's best friend and whatever. So the algorithm, I don't think is at fault. I think it's people's sort of consumption habits that are, and if they are kind of attainable by misinformation because somebody crafted a good story, I think that's there. I think what needs to happen on the social side is people who are actually willing to do things like tell the truth need to get better at putting together videos that are interesting enough for people to actually watch. Content is king, right? So if you're the guy who's out there refuting that, oh yes, the moon landing was real and these people are full of crap, well, put together a video that's interesting enough for people to go through, and it'll start popping up on the surface of people's people searches. So like, I started a YouTube channel a bunch of years ago with my kids, and 6 months ago when I started taking it seriously, I had a whole 39 subscribers, right? Because I'd never actually put much thought into my content. A couple of months ago, I started taking content seriously and trying to produce stuff that actually was relevant and better production quality into it. And right now I'm at 6,267 subscribers. So it's grown pretty effectively over the last 6 months. And it gains sort of 50 to 60 subscribers a day because I put rational thought into it. So I think a part of that is, I think the onus is on everyone else who's not spreading misinformation to do a little bit more than say, oh, I see something. I have to do more than say, well, that's bullshit, right? I actually have to come at it from a fashion that's actually going to make people want to see that post. And that's harder to do than people think it is, right? So you've got to get better at that communication side, which is what I think people like Wick and others are trying to do, is kind of come at it from the, hey, let's actually tell the real story instead of the one that gets the big buzz and the big quick headlines and the 10,000 views, and then I rush off to some other thing that I can get 10 to 12,000 views on.
No, I mean, yes and no. I think that like one of the things is a lot of people aren't mad that the system is being gamed. They're mad that they're not gaming the system, and that is
Yeah.
kind of a lot of
If
what
you
is
were to put
going
it.
into a lot of the complaints about algorithms, a lot of complaints about all these things. One of the things about the algorithm is that you can use it as a force for evil or a force for good. And yes, certain different types of things can be pushed and cannot be pushed and things like that. But you can, again, if you're skilled enough, work within the environment that you're presented. One of the problems I've seen, at least recently, with the exodus to Blue Sky. Thank you, aka Batozai, for the 10 gifted Wick TV memberships. I appreciate you, sir. Thank you. But one of the problems I'm seeing is we are self-selecting into the algorithms that we want to be in that make us feel good. And over on Blue Sky, it's one way, and over on X, it's another way. And I am concerned about that. It is creating this kind of choose your own reality world where it's really hard to break out of the echo chambers you get in. Does that make sense? Go ahead.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense because
It does, because you take I watch a couple of YouTube channels, and I probably watch some of the same ones in the RPG space that always complain about the algorithm not boosting their stuff. I'm like, well, maybe if you had better content, they would actually get seen. Because a lot of my company, we look at these algorithms all the time and see what's functioning on them and what's not. So we have tools that actually kind of dissect it and figure it out. And all the algorithms are starting to look at how do they push more positive statements than negative ones. So if you're the guy who comes out every time, he's like, that's terrible, that's awful, this is crisis after crisis and whatever, that's not going to get boosted nearly as much as somebody who's coming out with some kind of a positive message, at least not like it was just 6 months ago. So it's coming up to some huge shifts lately. I didn't mean to cut you off, Audacity.
no,
Go
you're
ahead,
fine.
Audacity.
I mean, it's
Yeah.
just all algorithms are built to feed biases, and there's not really a good way to counteract that kind of system, because you're a human being before you ever get onto one of these systems. You already have preconceived biases, or you're just completely ignorant. So you start down a rabbit hole and you just follow that rabbit hole because you're familiar with it and it makes you comfortable, like you guys are saying. There's no breaking this ordeal. And even though I'm not his biggest fan right now, Ryan Macbeth was keeping up with pace on like counter narratives to all the crazy things that would get posted about Ukraine war and military operations and blah blah blah. I mean, I think he got a little bit egotistical and maybe overextended at a certain point, but you got to cut. For every one Ryan Macbeth, there's 15 content creators that are putting out that the moon landing was fake and whatnot. And like you said, it's a force for good or evil. I don't really consider it that way. It's a force for gain or loss. It's I want to make money, so I'm going to make the content that makes me money. Making conservative content is hot, so I'm going to make conservative content to make money. It's why people like Matt Walsh for me don't pass the sniff test and everything. You're not fucking genuine. You are a money grubber. Like, you are trying to
blindly partisan.
Right.
Grifter.
But yeah, grifter, right? Like, you're not in this to actually try to educate people or give them a better sense of the world. You're just trying to reinforce biases, and biases are being reinforced whether it's being done by the content creators directly or by the algorithms that are running the platforms. And there's just
I want to touch on that for a moment, because I think you're hitting kind of around a point that I really want to kind of stress here. How to put it? I'll try this way. Bad actors are going to act badly in any system you create. The Matt Walshes, the Tim Pools, the grifters, as you say, of the world are, no matter how the algorithm is, no matter how you design your system, they are going to use that system in a negative way. people who think, well, we can just adjust things enough so that we can make it harder for these people are very clever. Okay, that's why they're successful. They're going to get around whatever you do. What you are doing is you're just putting arbitrary obstacles that aren't going to actually fix the problem. And we can look at this in Blue Sky, right? Blue Sky says we're going to heavily moderate our service, right? We're going to change the algorithm so we change how you are presented content and things like that. Blue Sky is currently one of the most violent places that you can ever imagine, right? Like, people have asked to, they've threatened Jesse Singal specifically with like beating him to death with hammers in the streets, right? They've doxed his house. It's not a good place, right? And X ain't better, right? But it's just bad in different ways. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and to touch on your point here, and I'm sure Tim would agree with me. Within tech, for every hole you close, you have a probability of opening 2 more every time. So if you build out your algorithm to start restricting people in a certain fashion, those people are going to find the other 2 fashions that allow them to get back into good graces or whatever. Or you're going to cut them out of the algorithm, and you're going to realize you're losing a shit ton of money now. So you got to open it back up in order for your company to stay viable. It's a lose-lose, and quite honestly, I just don't like algorithmic feeding. I really wish it would just be standards off of liked videos, subscribed content creators, and cookie data, and that's it. And then just no algorithmic suggestion. But sadly, in order for these companies to stay viable, they got to keep feeding you content. I'm not an Asmongold fan, and that dude's videos show up in my feed all the time, which was a beautiful thing about Sam Hyde's video that he would post on YouTube and X, is simply by mentioning Moist Critical and Asmongold in his video over and over and over again. AI content generation or AI content feeding would pick up on those mentions, and then his video would get shared around over and over and over again. He was gaming the shit out of the system to get his message out there, either as a very serious proponent of the message he was putting out there, or as just a genuine troll, which is the Sam Hyde way. It's if you stare at these things long enough, you could see the patterns pretty clearly and figure out the ways around them.
And this idea that like we can socially engineer bad ideas out of the idea pool, I don't think it quite works to any real degree. Like, look at Tucker Carlson, for example, or look at Trump, for example, right? Trump was banned from X. Trump was banned from the largest social media platforms, right?
Mm-hmm.
Guess who we're going to be signing in, swearing in on president in January 20th, right? Sure, right. He was unbanned afterwards, right? Like he did spend some time unbanned from these sites, but like it's not stopping any of this. It isn't working. None of this is working, right?
There's a psychological term for it too, because it's not only look at the Tucker Carlsons and whatnot. It's look at the Don Lemons and the Rachel Maddows as well. When you suppress certain content and start pushing other content forward, you tend to overwhelm people. They start to get uneasy about that. Like, okay, I was seeing Tucker Carlson content, but now I'm seeing like Rachel Maddow content like constantly. What's going on here? And they start to build subconsciously another bias against like, these aren't the messages I want to see. This isn't the information I want to see. Why are they suppressing me? I hate this platform now. I don't trust the system. Like you can have a negative effect by also trying to overcorrect it into building out subconscious activity of people just not trusting the powers to be to moderate things correctly. So you end up, it's a double-edged sword in a sense.
It also feeds into like the oppressor narrative, right? If you have a group of people saying they're silencing us, they're trying to silence the truth, and then you silence them, it kind of makes them correct, at least in that way. And so it's really, I think censorship is dangerous.
The only thing that beats misinformation is proper education, man. And I don't mean like just teaching like liberal values or conservative values. Like, hey, what like you got to teach basic shit like water boils at 270 degrees or like or
It's,
some shit
I
like
think
that.
I think it goes a little further than that because I used to teach at a university, right? So I taught at a couple of them actually. So one of the things I noticed was kids coming out of certain school systems knew how to memorize their way through a test, and kids coming out of other school systems knew how to problem solve and knew how to think for themselves and how to actually apply that knowledge to something. And it was always boiled down to where did you go to high school, on which one of those two you fell into. And if you look at it carefully enough, you could tell some school systems like, okay, that's a memorize to the test kid, and that's a hey, I give you a pile of problems and you can figure out how to use the tools to solve it. Otherwise known as you can think for yourself. So I think what we have to do in this country, if we really want to fix the problem, is go back, which is a whole nother live stream, by the way, go back and fix our K through 12 system where it's all boiled down to can you actually think rather than can you memorize for an exam.
Exactly. That's
So those
yes.
are two completely different skill sets.
It's solidly pertinent. Like we need to reinforce the education with a method of teaching pattern recognition. Like and by that method, people will be able to finally figure out if they're being led down a rabbit hole or not, you know. Which is why people like me or people in my profession or my generation are somewhat immune to this kind of shit is because our we were educated in a way for pattern recognition. We weren't educated
I
in a
don't
way
know if
on
you
just
guys are
like
immune to this kind of shit. I'm not gonna lie to you. I don't know if you're immune.
a
Right?
good portion of us are, man. Like you still got to consider the largest voter leg of the nation is, independents and moderates. It's not people on either side of the aisle. Like a lot of people are running a sniff test of their own before they make a decision. I mean, I don't, and I'm probably just saying that because I'm tired of being fucking black-pilled all the time, but
Aren't we all?
and yeah,
And
in all earnest, people are seeing a pattern, they're seeing a notion, and they're reactive to it.
and when in this country did both political parties start to have the notion that, hey, I'm an independent voter, I'm not registered or affiliated with a particular party. Well, if you're not with us, you're against us. Like, okay,
Yeah.
I'm not. You don't understand. I'm not with the other guy either. You have to earn my vote. And yeah, I'm 52, and I know I'm getting older, and I'm fine with that. I don't care. But I have teenage kids, and I would like once in my lifetime to actually vote for somebody instead of against somebody.
Right.
And in the last 30 years, I can't recall anybody I've actually voted for. I've always voted against. Maybe one exception, but
That's the
outside of
problem, though.
that,
That's large. Almost that's a larger problem than I think that social media has introduced because that's been far beyond social media, right? That's been a problem since before, right? Well, let me just ask this, maybe to kind of reconnect here. We don't got too much longer here, but I wanna get to it. Is TikTok destroying children's attention spans?
Oh yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Yes. That is a psychological fact that is identifiable in psychological studies. That has been something that's been identifiable in social media psychology studies, harkening all the way back to the early days of YouTube.
And if it is doing this, right? What do you predict? What do you think is going to be kind of some of the knockoff effects of that, right? How do we see it affecting our nation? How do we see it affecting education? How do we see it affecting just people in general and their interactions? Go ahead, please. I'm really curious.
It allows for a greater area of execution to generate biases. If you destroy the attention span, you destroy the ability for an individual to actually take in information, process it, and make a determination. When they're just going from the one thing to the next thing, the next thing, the next thing, the next thing, they're not actually taking in information. They're going from something that is educated to something that is reactionary.
so I look at I agree with you, but I'm going to add to that. So like I've worked at universities. I've been around them. There's one trying to recruit me to come back in as faculty, and I don't want to do it. I'd rather retire. But if you go look at any graduate department in physics, chemistry, any of the engineering fields, the graduate schools are not populated by even, I would argue that it's probably not even 50-50 US citizens. It's weighted against us. So the people getting master's degrees and PhDs in science and engineering aren't from this country. And I think it's part of a fallout because of that. where we're giving kids at a younger age all these tools to kind of reduce their attention span. And when you work in those fields, you need that attention span because it's just part of the deal when you try to get those graduate degrees. So if you look
Right.
at it, I think it's going to put us at an economic disadvantage in the sort of 15-year out range, but we can't compete um, economically with some of those other countries because we've farmed out all that we sent all the brainy we've taken all the knowledge of the people working at the universities now and educating our next scientists engineers and sent them back overseas and said, okay, fine, see you.
Yeah.
Yeah, as much as I hate how exploitative the H-1B visa system is and how much of a competition it creates for the American the natural born American labor pool, I mean that's just the when a culture is not exposed to brain rot at this scale and this consistency, they're exposed to other more structured things. So they end up with they're probably not the best coders or whatever, but they're able to pay attention long enough to get the work done and at least make a functional product, even if it's not the best product. So when you constantly deteriorate this very important part of young childhood development, you're I'm sorry, but you're just not creating a viable system for talent in America.
If not a ban, how do we fix this?
Nuke China.
Okay. Any other ideas? Any other ideas that don't involve nuclear?
Listen,
No.
I think this is a culture problem and as well as just kind of like a media problem overall. And because here's the thing, technology has kind of opened up like a can of worms here because obviously like, if what people want to see the most is what gets popular. A lot of people, what they want to see the most is certainly not what's best for them. And that's why we get stuff like this. It's basically like what people have an appetite for. And people will always kind of gravitate towards what they do unless they do have other options kind of on a mass social scale. People making like individual decisions away from this stuff is good, but obviously it doesn't persuade a lot of people who don't think about it as much.
Yeah.
But that's hard obviously if you don't believe, which I don't really believe in, being like, no more this, no more that, we're banning this, we're banning that, you have to live a healthy life, no more anything else. Because then, where's our free will? Where's our ability to make choices for our own life?
Fair enough. Fair enough. Gang, we've kind of run the gamut on this one. Again, I wasn't.
Oh, I thought
wasn't
we
sure.
were doing round robin.
Oh,
How do we
did you have a thought? Go ahead.
Yeah, I
please.
mean,
yeah, I'm just saying
if
you're
it's
getting to. Yeah, we're getting
sorry,
to
yeah, I know you gotta
closing
go.
time,
You
yeah.
gotta go eat your chicken wings and shit. No, to solve it from a security threat point of view or whatever, to solve it as a pertinent long-term issue, you got to build up the standards in the United States around consumer protections and data right protections and everything like that. You actually have to put these companies' feet to the fire on, hey, if you're gonna poke this data, you have a responsibility for it. Yes, the liability is on you. Yes, if anything goes wrong, you're going to be held responsible for it. And the consumers of your product are going to be able to sue you for millions of dollars if you screw up bad enough. To solve it on a cultural level, parents have to start paying attention to their kids. You can't put your kids in front of a screen 24/7. You can't let the TV. It was a boomer parenting point. Don't let the TV raise your kids. Like, this is
Yeah.
not a new concept. You have to understand that when they're weaseling away with their smartphones to go watch TikTok videos in their room all day, it's not a good thing. Oh, let's go out and play catch. Yeah, they'll roll their eyes and hate you for it, but it's what you got to do. You got to be active, and you got to make the time to make sure that you're actually paying attention and tending to the garden that is the future of America. So,
It's about
I don't know.
If you're talking, we can't
Get
hear
off
you.
your ass.
Hold on, Tim. If you're talking, we can't hear you.
the no TV thing. I wasn't allowed to even like glance upon the TV until I was 5, but I was
Yeah.
allowed to use the computer.
Yeah,
So that
homework
That's
was
time
not
was
better, right? Like,
Yeah, I started using
homework time
Windows
was 4 to
98 when I
6.
was 4. But, like, I wasn't allowed to look at the television. I don't know what that was about, but alright.
So
so
I hope you can hear me now.
yes.
Yep.
So to be fair, boomer parents had to have a TV commercial come on at 9:00 asking if they knew where their kids were, right? So let's just get that right out of it. But
My
the other thing
mom's
is I'm divorced, right? So I've been single a couple of years, and I noticed when I started going out and dating again, when you go out, you see people out at dinner, and they're all looking at this. You've got to, like, as a parent, you have to put that shit down once in a while, and actually make eye contact with your kids and have a conversation. Otherwise, kids emulate parents. Like, my dad was an avid reader. So if you look around any of my internet feeds, there's nothing but books wall to wall because I'm still an avid reader. I've got like 1,200 of them around this house, and I've arguably read all of them except for the ones I just bought over the years. So, and a couple that my dad had in his collection I still haven't read because he and I have different tastes. But I am a reader because that's what I saw my dad do on a regular basis. I saw my dad go out and play softball, so I went out and played softball. My kids, I'm a physicist. My ex-wife's a chemical engineer. My kids, I don't think any of them, including the high school freshman, has ever brought home a semester-long average less than a 92. Right, so I got nerds, running around the house. So they're smart kids, but it's because they see me and my ex-wife, working our butts off on things that are intellectual based. So they emulate what parents do. If you're sitting around watching TikTok and YouTube all day, guess what your kids are going to do? Right, sit around and watch TikTok and YouTube all day.
If you know what, raise your kids right. They should see you watching Wick TV all day, so that when your kids grow up,
Damn
they
it, I
will
was
also
about
watch
to make
Wick
that
TV all
joke.
day.
my
Don't do that,
gosh.
please. Don't let your kids watch this show. It is not appropriate for minors. $10 from Psychonaut. Thank you for the $10 to say this, and I'm really curious because I want you to elaborate on this. We can't say be better parents when we engineer a society to make parents less involved, and I want to pick at that because I don't know what you mean. So elaborate if you're still in chat. Please tell me what you mean by engineering the society to make parents less involved. Does anyone want to take a crack at it?
Yeah, of
Go
course
ahead.
I
Maybe
do. But if anybody else,
economic factors somewhat,
I
as
think
well as
we're geared around 2-income families so much that it gets difficult. But
yeah,
and people's
fucking
expectations as well.
Patrick Bet David gave away the game, baby. You gotta work 80-hour weeks. Like, bro, I got kids. Like, I can't work 80-hour weeks. I can't immigrate from Iran and fucking be a millionaire like several years later. I got shit to do, But the technology boom in America is definitely engineered around late Gen Xers and millennials. Cool new thing, and get on it. If you don't get on it, your friends are gonna not be your friend anymore. Like, millennials and late Gen Xers are very susceptible to that kind of behavior.
Yeah.
No, we can't hear you again, Tim. Sorry.
Oh no, I wasn't saying anything. I'm like, as the resident Gen Xer, I'm like, yeah, I can kind of see that.
Fair enough.
I can speak for Gen Z, and things
ahead.
are very questionable. Oh my god. Yeah, I don't have that many friends my age. That's why that's why I spend a lot of time talking to people about politics online that are like double
that's
my
a
age
problem
time.
just in general with younger people that I've observed is they don't have as many friends, right? And that seems.
Well, you guys
You know
are
what?
my friends.
Here's a problem.
I have friends on the internet.
That's. I don't think that's like that. It can be real friends, but in a lot of cases, it's empty calories.
Exactly.
Yeah, I
It's
have
empty
I have
calories.
friends. I have friends in real life. A lot of whom are like older than me, but like not so many that are exactly like around my age because it's just maybe when I'm a bit older and like people who are in my age group are at a similar life situation, because I'd say that I grew up pretty fast, so I'm at a situation where I've got like I've got a house, I've been in a relationship for 6 years, I've doing this, that, and the third. Then a lot of people my age are like, oh my god, my boyfriend liked a post of another girl on Instagram, and I'm like, are we in high school? Please help me.
You know what's funny is I'm dating a therapist who tells similar stories. Like,
It's like, oh my God, somebody checked in at a restaurant. That was the same restaurant their ex was at. I'm like, coincidence happens, right? That's
Yeah.
Psychonaut's elaborating, so I'm going to read what he says. He says,
Ooh.
we make both parents go to work to make a living, stress, then we make all of our technology geared towards passivity and make it the easy option for kids and people. Then you have
Right.
divorces, which break up the family. Yes, I understand that some are needed. It is still a contributing factor. Thank you for the elaboration. I really do appreciate it.
The whole "there's always a way out" or "there's always something better" mindset is definitely a contributing factor to it. With things like, I am so glad I never got into Instagram, because I've seen it just absolutely destroy people in my social circles. Like, bro,
everybody wants to keep up with the, hey, I saw this person on vacation. I've got to go on that vacation.
yeah, exactly. Everybody's got to be on the trend. There's a song I feel like everybody needs to listen to, and it's "Everybody" by Yo Gotti. It's a very important cultural song.
True.
And I think people, can learn a lot from it. And you just got to realize, man, you're in the spot you're at. If you were successful, good for you. You're a millionaire, that sucks. That's great. If you're poor, well, that sucks. But take accountability and take count of the things around you before you start, comparing yourself to fucking Elon Musk and shit.
I mean, I get this all the time. It's like, I work in the venture space. I hang around with a bunch of investors and whatnot. And people are like, oh, if you want to be rich, you have to appear rich. So you need to buy this car, this watch, be seen here, be seen there. I'm like, no. If you want to be rich, you have to be rich. And then you get those things. It doesn't work in reverse. Right. So,
and rich people all have one thing in common, and it's a tremendous amount of patience.
Exactly. So
A lot of them don't spend their money like that too. Like, there's the people who try to appear rich, but a lot of them aren't. And then a lot of people.
You know what's funny? I know a number of retired NFL players, and the ones that are like bankrupt after 2 or 3 years are the ones that look like that, and the ones that are driving Ford F-150s are worth like $200 million.
It is
really
what
funny.
it is. I before we go, I wanted to touch on something that I think was hinted at with all these things. I worry, one of the worries I have, especially for younger people, especially for Katya's generation here, is we have made it so easy to never be uncomfortable. If someone's making you uncomfortable, saying something that makes you uncomfortable, block them. They're gone. They disappear. They're literally gone, right? We do so much of our interactions in spaces where, our social interactions, to be clear, in spaces where we never have to deal with anyone with substantively different views than us. We can simply make them disappear in a very real way. Block them, mute them, etc. I am not advocating here, and I want to make it clear, to remove blocks or remove mutes. What I'm advocating here is that we take a real good hard look at how we ourselves use that, and in ways in which we use to simply avoid discomfort. There has never been it's never been easier to avoid discomfort than it is right now, and I think it is causing us to have a huge social problem in America. Agree or disagree? Let's start with Katyusha, because we're talking shit on you right now. Okay, your generation. Go ahead.
Based. Yeah, I think that a lot of people do absolutely like overuse these things, and they only talk to people who do have the same beliefs as them. I mean, as somebody, who's tried to get into other political circles over time, like usually like on the more like lefty sphere, those people will not talk to me.
Yeah.
Because it's a very purity testy thing. This happens a lot, in like fan spaces as well. So much purity testing. If you're not in it the exact same way as other people, like, you're out. And I mean, I do think that people, should be okay to be like uncomfortable somewhat. Obviously, there's points, where I totally understand
There's
blocking
lines,
people. Like
obviously,
with
right?
harassment, like if somebody's beliefs and like or what they're saying is like so heinous, it's like it's making you like really, really like not just uncomfortable, but like like there's a point where it's beyond that, like when people are, like when people post all the time calling for violence for people, or like groups. I understand if people might not want to see that, might want to block those people, because that type of speech, I get not wanting to see it all the time, especially on places like Twitter where that shows up a lot. But that's different, I think, than just general discomfort from people being different in belief than you. Like, people should really kind of not just overuse blocking of people, especially if they get most of their interaction online.
What are some other thoughts, and then we'll go to closings.
I think also, blocking or take like the dating world that exists out there today. It used to be you go out and meet people, and you had this sort of way of interacting with people that said, "Hey, I'm not a dick, right? I'm actually a nice person." And now, because we can swipe left or right so quickly and so often, it's like, we have this infinite series of choices we can go through, and it's a lot different. Like, I haven't been single in, we won't talk about how many years because I'm old, but all of a sudden I'm single again, and the dating world has shifted greatly. And what happens at my age with, number one, I actually have a job, and everybody's like, "Ooh, that's the person we want to go out with," right? So, which was a unique experience for me. But because there's that swipe left, swipe right thing, a lot of men in my age bracket who wind up single are like, "Oh, well, I got 30 girls I'm going to go out with, not just one. Why would you want to go out with just one? Just pick that one and that one and that one." I'm like, it's. I think the online experience has made us look at social interactions as disposable, and I think we should stop. We should get beyond that. Does that make sense?
No, the social
try to sum up with that going on for an hour.
Disposable is a big one, right? Like, it's so easy to just find new people to talk to. And again, I'm talking like the empty calorie people. No offense to my online brothers and sisters, right? I understand. Look, I live in a very rural area. I can't just go outside and make friends with neighbors as easy as someone in a city, right? But it is a substantively
especially where
different...
you live.
Yeah. It is a substantively different thing to have an interaction in person versus an interaction on camera versus an interaction on text versus an interaction on voice, right? Like, there are levels to this, there are layers to this. And I think that, yes, we are training a generation of people to view relationships as disposable. And that's almost another topic that I'll discuss at some point, but that is a problem. Go ahead.
I feel bad. It's one of the reasons I feel bad coming onto the show, even though there's information I want to put out into the world without a camera. I should be showing my face. I should be showing like that I'm a real human being and everything. I had this situation with where I work where I have to interact with people all over the world with, teams or whatever. But we have a company get together to discuss like the nature of the company, our direction, and everything. And like when people meet me in person, and when I meet them, like the relationship becomes way more real, right? It's one thing I hate about the internet is that it brought the entirety of the world to our front door. And now we've lost any kind of interest in going out and exploring and meeting and attempting any kind of true social interaction. It's way too easy for me to get into the Wick Discord and just start talking shit and blah, 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 and trolling people. But as fun as it is, there's a genuine want or probably even a need to build a genuine human connection in there. But it's like you say, it's empty calories.
It's like sugar. It's good. It's tasty, and I like to eat it. But it can't be everything. It can't be all I eat.
If there was ever a Wick barbecue, it would make the whole experience that much more greater, though, right?
Look,
I don't know.
If you guys, tell you what, I got some rich ass people in my community. If you guys want to like put a pool together to set up like a barbecue or something, an in-person meetup event, we can do that. We can absolutely.
Yeah, I'll rent out a whole VFW and shit.
Yeah, let's do it. Okay, with that, gang. Thank you, gang, for coming kind of last minute on all of this. I know it's it is something I was listening to the arguments today, and I was like, you know what, I really want to talk about this. And so I appreciate you guys my guests here for coming on and discussing it with me, and I appreciate you, my dear audience, both in Twitch and Kick and in YouTube, for choosing to spend your time on this subject with us. I really do appreciate it, and I do appreciate all the donations and the subs. Like, I appreciate the Twitch subs you guys have given me today. I appreciate the memberships, the YouTube memberships from Batozai. I appreciate the super chats from Psychonaut and others. All of this helps me out. It's really nice. If you could like that, if you hit that like button, that's free, gang, right? And it actually does boost me in the algorithms, right? It really does help me out. The shows that get more likes gets more views, and that more views I get, the more people whose algorithm I get pushed to, and it's a cascading effect. So
we were just bitching about the algorithm.
I know. Look, we're gonna use it. And Kamikaze, thank you for the Prime sub. Hashtag fuckwick. Yes. What's coming up next week? Okay. Again, I'm going to give each of these guys an outro, but just give me a second here. So next week, Monday, we're going to talk specifically about the meta changes and Zuckerberg's discussion of Rogan. And we're going to have Cypher there. We're going to have a few others to talk about that. It should be fun. On Tuesday, we're just going to do talk call-ins. It's going to be chill. It's going to be relaxed. Wednesday, I'm hosting a one-on-one debate between Visora and Quibbles Over Coffee. Visora wants to argue that we should have a state healthcare, right? A socialized healthcare system, and that socialized healthcare system should fund state sex workers. So that'll be a fun debate. Then on Thursday, we're going to have Not So Erudite. We're going to have Sad Kit Kat. We're going to have Kibaphone. I don't know how to say her name. And maybe one more. Hopefully, I'm trying to bully someone into it right now. Women, basically, to come in and talk about what it's like to be a woman online. Hopefully,
if you need somebody extra for that, I'm down.
Yeah, what are you gonna do with a panel of 2 people?
There's gonna be 4 there. I just talked about it.
4 whole women in the
whole
Wick
women
space.
In the Wick space. It's
Jesus.
crazy,
Wow.
right? But there's a lot. They just don't talk to you. Okay, they're there.
Yeah, true.
They just don't.
You can smell me
you.
through the Discord.
Okay.
I talk to everyone.
Yes, but regardless, they're going to talk about the unique challenges they face, the unique experiences they've had, and hopefully we'll have a better showing than the men when we tried that with the men yesterday. Hopefully they don't descend into women good or women bad. We'll find out.
It was so much fun.
It was frustrating. But
sorry, I missed that one.
I'm not. I'm sorry I didn't miss it. But we're gonna give the mic here to we're gonna start with Audacity, and then we're gonna end with Katyusha. Tell people where they can find you, tell people what you do, and tell people any closing thoughts on all the things we talked about today. Audacity, take it away.
Yeah. I'm usually just trolling around Twitter, at Audacity Complex with a 0 instead of an O. And hopefully if I'm doing my job right, you can't find me at all. So, the ending message I want to give her is just stop freaking the fuck out, please. Like, you still have to go to work, on Monday and shit. Like, just, you're going to be okay. And if you're not okay, you can bitch to me about it on the Discord. It's fine. I love all of you.
Well, thank you for being here. I really appreciate you jumping on, and I really appreciate your contributions. Thank you. Tim Imholt, go ahead.
So you can find me on Twitter at Timothy Imholt and on YouTube at Timothy Imholt. And what you'll find is I talk about whatever I kind of feel like talking about because that's just the way my life works these days. Usually that's either some fantasy or sci-fi or action book or role-playing games or what my main job is during the day. That's artificial intelligence, machine learning, particularly in the predictive analytics space. And the reason I talk about all that other stuff is because my job makes my brain want to melt on a regular basis. But I'm going to have some fun in the coming weeks on my YouTube channel and start rolling up. And this is going to make the RPG community's head spin. Sorry about this week, but I'm going to do it anyway. I'm going to start going through this book and rolling up characters on the new sets of rules instead of the old sets of rules, so that people can see these are not the root of all evil, and the world will still continue to revolve upon its axis, even though Wizards of the Coast put out a new edition.
Oh, that was a fun debate we had too. Well,
Solid.
maybe we'll have some talks about that. Thank you for being here. Check him out, gang. He does some great work. Follow him on Twitter. I have a link to his YouTube in my description. Click on it. Katusha.
Yeah, so hi. I am Premier Katya on both X and on Blue Sky. I like to talk about politics. I'm kind of lefty, so if you don't like that, then sorry to be you. And thank you for inviting me on, Wick. Y'all are super awesome. Good discussion. Yep.
You can tell it in her voice. She's very excited to be here. She was
I'm
very
always
excited
very excited.
for all the
She's
discussions that
vaxxed.
we had. Links to her Twitters in my YouTube description. You can click on it. Please do so. Reward these people for coming on my show. Okay, with that, we're gonna raid out into Sansol. Tell him it is a hate raid, and that he needs to be a better person. So wave, bye everyone, bye.
Bye. I'm a
Okay.
monkey. Bye.
I don't know about any of that, so I'll see you guys later. Okay.
Yeah, I'll see you.
Boop.